Hey guys, what is up? Lord Nick here, bringing you another League of Legends related video. In this video, guys, I want to talk to you about Clutch Gaming. I'm gonna make this kind of like a weekly thing. I want to talk about Clutch, on a week by week basis. How they how they do. What what they did right, what they did wrong. How are we looking for them to improve, and what we should expect from them for this coming season. And so, to get started, guys, we're going to be talking about this last week where they went 2-0 for the weekend. Oh my god, this feels great. Like this was the same feeling I had at the start of last split where they started 2-0. Difference is the start of last split they started 2-0 and then they didn't play anywhere near consistent thereafter. But the first 2 weeks so far has seemingly they are playing much more consistent to their own style. Each of them have kind of it feels as if each of the players have kind of come into working together finally and are starting to build up some team synergy and some want to win and awesome drive power coming from all of them so far. So, what did we see this weekend that was a big improvement from last weekend? One of the biggest things was their draft, guys. So, last week they did draft a little bit more. They drafted some harder to play compositions. They played, much more aggressive comps, but they weren't really team fight oriented. They they were more oriented on getting picks or starting off a fight where the enemy is out of position. But neither of the teams last week really kind of played out of position too much, which just made their comps so much harder to actively um, get a lead on, and so because of it, they ended up just losing the games. And it wasn't, they didn't make too many hard, heavy mistakes, 2 weeks ago, but they made enough of them that the other teams could just snowball off of it. Or, well, C9 snowballed off of it. It was a much closer game for their first game last week. Now, this week, though, much better week overall, right? Like we're versing Golden Guardians again, top of the four team. In my prediction video, I put Golden Guardians as a number 4 team, and rightfully so. They're starting off really, really well. Golden Guardians is a team that looks like they're going to be a really hard team for almost anybody to beat. Well, our boys over here at Clutch Gaming managed to beat them, and they managed to beat them convincingly. Like, there wasn't a point where I was like, oh, they're going to throw right here. This is where they throw. Like, there were points where it's like, this is where they usually throw, but they look like they're in a commanding lead, and they held on to that game. And what were some of the big changes here was their composition overall. The guys drafted a much more team fight oriented comp. And it was so nice to see these changes. Um, and I was just, it was just kind of an ecstatic thing for me to see that they actually, they changed how they needed to play. They worked as a team, they worked together. And where were some of the bigger highlights there? I mean, of course, people were talking about the fact that um, that everybody just looked good, and Tomonte was kind of hard carrying it, and you had Cody Set and Vulcan looking really, really strong in the bot lane, which I said as a highlight for my first video about Clutch Gaming, that these two looked extraordinarily strong in comparison to just the rest of the team in the first week. Now, this week, Lyra really stepped up his game. He became extremely aggressive. He got a 3-buff start, I believe, in both of his games, and he was constantly controlling vision, getting aggressive, and tracking the enemy jungler to either counter gank or get a better position gank on the opposite side of the map. He traded for objectives better than the other teams. His objective control was much higher. The team's response to his objective control was much better. There was just fluidity in all of the things that they did. They worked as a team opposed to a lot of solo queue individuals. They tracked the objectives. They pushed pressure when they needed to. They waited for picks. They grouped together and played team fights extraordinarily well. Now, in their second game this week, there was some points where it's like, wow, do they actually throw this to 100 Thieves? But it wasn't as much them throwing as 100 Thieves were just positioning in fights exceptionally well in comparison to what they were doing early in the game. Most of the game, 100 Thieves looked like crap, but at the very end, they held on for a good 10, 15, almost 15 minutes before the game closed out. And they shouldn't have been able to do that, but they did it because 100 Thieves played better than they'd been playing the rest of the game. They worked so much better together as a team that it probably caught Clutch off guard. They underestimated the fact that they would make this massive, switch in mentalities and playing as a team and holding out when they hadn't been doing that the entire game. So I don't blame Clutch as much for that. I give a little props to 100 Thieves for being able to do something on that. But it does allow Clutch to realize that there might have been a hole in their system there. They might have gotten a little too confident and didn't pay attention to these nuances that they should have been able to pick up on. So that was probably the biggest mistake of the weekend, was not noticing it. But all in all, they still won. They still managed to close out the game. They they regrouped, retaliated, and pushed it out and won the game. So they ended up finding the ways in, but they did definitely have at least a weak point there. As for the game versus Golden Guardians, there wasn't much to nitpick there. I mean, there was a few picks here or there that Golden Guardians got. I think they ended like 9 or 10 to 4. Like, there wasn't almost any kills in the game, which is really good. They just zoned them off, took objective, used the ability to the fact that they knew how to farm better, and just played the macro game, which I think is something that all of these players should have been doing. These guys have been good to pretty good at microplay in all their respected roles, and at some point or another. But each of them are kind of past the point of where you think of them as superstar carries, right? Like, Huni's already on a downward trend, has been for a while now. So, like, what do you put him on? You put him on a guy that's still an aggressive champion there, where you can still flex some of his abilities, but has a lot more power behind it, so that it's not as much reliant on his ability to play it as much as the champion itself is just relatively powerful right now. Like Rumble, for instance. It was good pick 2 times this week, and it worked really well. Huni was doing exceptionally well this week in comparison to some previous performances. Now, I wouldn't say in comparison to like everybody else in the LCS he was phenomenal, but in comparison to himself in last split, it was great to watch him do stuff that was, not feeding. Lyra played a few closer to his style jungles that allowed him to actually make some picks and contest objectives, opposed to Lee Sin, who's all about trying to get those picks early, and if he doesn't get that pressure, he just doesn't get to do anything. The bot lane just consistently played out the way they did, and Damonte played it out consistently. It's definitely good to see him back in form like he was at the beginning of the last split, opposed to towards the end, where you could definitely tell there was some tilt coming in for the team just because the team wasn't performing like they were in scrims. And I think, also from it, Mixcrags is definitely doing something well now. He's found a way to start trying to tie these guys together and get them to play like they have been in scrims, supposedly, because that's all we'd been hearing this last split, is that they played really well in scrims. They were just like flubbing on stage, but they weren't giving us a real valid reason to it. But I did notice that in the Discord, Mixcrags finally got a little bit more talkative in his own chat on the Clutch Gaming Discord. That was kind of neat. And he addressed it himself. He's like, it's been really difficult trying to convince these guys that they need to stop, throwing their leads. Like, they take risks that they didn't need to take, but we don't know why they would be doing this. It wasn't something that the players were trying to do. They were just subconsciously doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And trying to beat somebody's subconscious is always the most difficult thing, because you're not always aware that you're doing it, except for like you get to see it and then you're like, oh wow, that was me, stuff like that. It's kind of hard for a coach to effectively get in there and be like, hey dude, we got to change this about you. So like, you have to actively focus on the mistake that you are not actively focusing on to make. Like, that makes sense. You're not actively focusing to make that mistake, but you now have to focus on it to fix that mistake. So it's kind of hard to convince players of how to do that and how to direct them. So it's really nice, though, to see that he's starting to talk to the community about certain things. People were trying to ask what the strats are, and he's like, I can't tell you strats, guys, but like, I can tell you this, these are improving. Certain things that you guys have been seeing us fail at is improving. Like, it was just nice to see some type of communication from the team coming out to the fans. Is something that the team itself had kind of struggled with doing last split, which kind of struggled in building their viewer base and building a fan base behind them. But I think now, just because of the success, they're a little bit more open about like, hey, we can share some of the things that were going wrong and how we're fixing it, how we're addressing it, with a little, of course, with that, a little bit of a barrier of giving all the details. They're still giving more details than they were, so that was kind of nice to see. But all in all, guys, week 2 was a great success in the history of Clutch Gaming for this split. Now it's a matter of if they can keep it up. Now, I'm predicting this next week's going to be a 1-1 week. As much as I want to be on the hype train that it's going to be a 2-0 week, I feel like they're going to do really well in one of their games. I feel like they're going to try this composition, similar composition to this week again. Um, and then one of two things is going to happen. The very next day, their composition is going to get picked apart in the pick and ban phase, and they're going to go try a shift to another comp. Um, which I don't know how well I'd hope for that one. Or the other one is that they're just going to try to do that week one compositions again because they're feeling more confident in themselves. And I'm not putting too much faith in that. As I said before, I feel like these players need time before they go back to being the caliber of micro excellence that they believe themselves to be. They need to get their macro on point. They need to get their mental game on point first. So I feel like they should do a few more weeks at least of just doing these easy to execute team fight comps before they try to jump back into this giant micro play style. But these have been my opinions, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If so, please hit the subscribe, the like button, share this video with your friends, maybe follow me on Facebook or Twitch or maybe my Twitter, all of which will be down below in the blah 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 blah. All will be down below in the description. Feel free to leave a comment about how you felt and what you want to see in my next videos, guys. And thank you all for watching and have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day.